All right, so next up we have a pair of presenters. Reaghan Murphy serves as Regional Planner 2 for Centralina Regional Council, where she supports the cultivation of vibrant, accessible communities across nine-county Greater Charlotte region. She has experience working across a range of regulatory environments on transportation and land use planning, community engagement, design and facilitation, as well as data analysis and mapping. She is currently managing development of the first regional transportation demand management program for the Greater Charlotte region. Reaghan holds a master's in urban planning and transportation and mobility planning from the University of Southern California. She earned a dual BA degrees in geography and global studies from the University of South Carolina Honors College. Additionally, an associate planner at Kittelson Associates, Scott Curry is an expert in multimodal transportation planning, walkable, bikeable urban design, stakeholder and public engagement, and balancing difficult trade-offs to support transportation equity. In his 13-year career, Scott has worked with dozens of communities across the country. Scott is the valedictorian of the College of Architecture and Planning at Ball State University and graduated first in his class, the University of Michigan, with a master's in both urban planning and urban design. In his previous work with the City of Charlotte, Scott oversaw a capital investment portfolio of over $175 million, including many of Charlotte's most significant and challenging bicycle and pedestrian projects. He is co-founder of the Open Streets 704 program, and he has been part of award-winning project teams recognized by the American Planning Association and Congress for New Urbanism. Please welcome Reaghan Murphy and Scott Curry.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing? Almost ready for lunch? I know we're the one thing in the way of lunchtime, so we'll hope to keep you engaged and interested. But I am Reaghan Murphy, as Oliver mentioned. I work at Centralina Regional Council, and I'm here with Scott Curry, our lead consultant from Kittelson and Associates. And as Oliver mentioned, we are working to build the first regional transportation demand management plan and program for the Greater Charlotte region. So we really appreciate the partnership with Bike Walk and See. Shout out to Terry and to Oliver and the entire team for all the work that's gone into today and this weekend. And we really appreciate their partnership on our plan development process as well. They're really integral to some of the work we've been doing so far. So with that, I'll jump right in. How many of you are familiar with Transportation Demand Management, or TDM? Yes, okay, we've got some experts in the room. Good stuff. I love to hear that. So transportation demand management, the way that I like to think about it is it's all about transportation choice, right? And promoting mobility choices, both offering additional options for folks as they're looking for ways to travel and meet their daily needs, but then also in educating and promoting the choices that do exist, both existing and new mobility options. And you know, transportation demand management programs, while this is the first regional program that will exist in the Greater Charlotte area, there are local and regional programs that exist across the country, and you'll hear from Scott in just a few minutes about some of those. But those programs are really critical in those communities to promoting quality of life and access to opportunity through access to jobs, access to healthcare, and other critical services. So transportation demand management is a really important approach to transportation planning and livable community planning. And for us, as we are thinking about TDM for the Charlotte region, we really are thinking about, you know, TDM as an opportunity to shift folks away from single occupancy vehicle trips, both for commutes and then for trips to meet their other daily needs. And when we think about that, we need to think about how we can encourage people to change how they travel, right? And seeking alternative modes, more sustainable modes, and environmentally friendly modes of transportation, and also changing when people travel. And we think about this in kind of a two-pronged approach, right? So we're either increasing, or in tandem, we're increasing mobility options, so through things like infrastructure improvements and upgrades and expansions, actually increasing the options folks have available to them. But also a big piece of TDM is changing travel behavior, right? getting folks to kind of step outside their comfort zone and consider a mode they might not use on a daily basis to try riding the bus or the train if that's accessible to them and if that's accessible in their communities, or riding the bike to work, walking your kids to school if that's available instead of sitting in a hours-long pickup line or drop-off line in the morning. So that's really, those two approaches are what we think about when we think about TDM. And in terms of increasing travel options, right, there's a lot of different ways we can do that, and we've heard a lot about that and the importance of providing those additional choices and upgrading infrastructure this morning. But really what we're going to talk about today and engage all of you on is how we change behavior, right? So how do we incentivize folks to try new options? How do we, make folks aware of the options that exist, or encourage folks to expand their approach to how they meet their daily needs through transportation? And really a successful TDM program that combines strategies from both of those approaches can have all kinds of benefits on communities, right? You're going to see, improved quality of life, improved, walking, biking, and transit, improved use of active transportation infrastructure, and also improved access to opportunity, improvements in equity, and improvements to economic vitality. And one thing, too, I just want to underscore, because we know North Carolina, and our nation, of course, but North Carolina especially, we have such a diversity of types of communities across our state. And one thing I really want to underscore is TDM is flexible, and you can use, different menus of strategies to meet the needs of different community contexts. And in fact, you should, right? So a TDM program in an urban community or a heavily populated and densely developed community is going to look very different than a TDM program serving more rural communities, right? And as we're engaging in developing this regional program, we're thinking about this broad suite of strategies, right? So how do we meet the needs of the diverse community types across our region? And we encourage you all to be thinking about that too as we're speaking today. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott to talk about TDM in other places.
Thanks, Reagan. So super happy to be here with everybody today. Feel super fortunate to be working with the great folks at Centralina Regional Council and NCDOT on this. Part of the work that we've been doing so far in the project is to start benchmarking some strategies that other places are using to implement TDM in their regions. And so to tee up the conversation that we hope to have with you all in just a bit, we thought it might be useful to give you some of that context and run through what some other regions are doing to implement TDM. So I'm going to walk through just 5 examples very quickly. Some of you may be familiar with some of these. Anyone from Raleigh or Wilmington who might be familiar with Triangle Transportation Choices and Go Coast? So we've talked to some folks from the Wilmington MPO and from TJ-COG to learn about what they're doing in those regions in terms of TDM. We've also done some research on Portland Metro, Austin, Texas, and the Georgia Commute Options Program in Atlanta. So I'm going to start with Raleigh. Raleigh, the program there is called Triangle Transportation Choices. It's hosted by TJ-COG. That program covers just over 2 million people and close to about a 4,000 square mile area. Some of the things that Triangle Transportation Choices focuses heavily on is pass-through grants to partners. So they maintain relationships with nonprofit partners and employers across the region, and do a lot of work issuing grants to those partners to implement TDM strategies that reach the general public. We tried to pull some key lessons from what these programs are doing across the state and elsewhere. And one thing that we took away from the Triangle Transportation Choices program is you can't try to be everything to everyone. TDM programs can very easily be a mile wide and an inch deep, and we feel like that's a pitfall that we want to avoid in the Charlotte region. And Triangle Transportation Choices has been good about being clear about their role and what they can and can't do given their staff capacity and the partnerships they have. And so we're taking that as some inspiration for the work that we're hoping to do in Charlotte. Wilmington, so this program is hosted by the Wilmington Urban Area MPO. It's called the Go Coast program. They cover just over 400,000 people, a little bit smaller of an area, obviously, in Wilmington. They focus heavily on marketing, outreach, and education to reach the general public and try to influence different travel behaviors. They help support things like the River to Sea bike ride, which is a really big deal in Wilmington. If y'all have ever seen that, I think we've heard about that ride at past bike walk summits before. So the Go Coast program is involved in that. They've also, I think, taught some lessons to us about not putting all your eggs in one basket. They have had some experience with employer-based funding and employer-based programming, and as you all know, the appetites of employers can come and go depending on leadership, and having sort of sustainable program activities requires diversifying your approach beyond just employer-based types of programming. Atlanta, this is a huge program. This is the biggest TDM program we've benchmarked. It seems like everything related to transportation in Atlanta is big, so no surprise that their TDM program is big. They recently got some grant funding, and their annual fiscal year budget is right around $12 million. So it's a big deal. It's a huge program. They cover over 6 million people and about 6,200 square miles. They have really focused on branding and messaging with this Georgia Commute Options program. They have versions of it that they use to reach out to local municipalities across the Atlanta region, and also to things called TMAs, Transportation Management Associations, which is something they use to try to get hyper-local with the way that they're implementing transportation solutions. Basically, a TMA is just a group of employers or employment campuses, organizations that come together to try to take a more proactive approach on influencing transportation in their area. So you might picture like a Catawba College campus and downtown Salisbury forming a TMA to try to figure out how they might influence transportation behavior in this area. That could be one example of how a TMA might work. So Atlanta has invested heavily in trying to grow partnerships through TMAs and implement their program that way. Portland obviously has a really long history of innovation and transportation thinking. The TDM program there is no exception. It's been around since 1979. This is the oldest program that we've talked to, and have learned a lot of things from them. We feel like do a pretty good job of tailoring to the different types of community contexts they have across their region. Reaghan earlier mentioned the urban, suburban, rural types of strategies that are necessary to reach folks in a region as big as the 10-county region that we're working on here in the greater Charlotte region. They also have these long-standing partnerships. They've been around since 1979, and so they are sort of hallmarks of collaborating closely with partners to try to implement TDM solutions across their region. And then finally, Austin. This is another pretty big program. It covers over 2 million people, over 5,000 square miles. Austin, I think, has been a really strong leader in taking an equity lens to their TDM programming. They have, in partnership with folks around the region, developed a transit empowerment fund that they use to give bus passes to organizations that work directly with organizations that serve low-income folks across the region. So they're using that. They also have some subsidized bus pass programs that they use to give access to transit across the region. They have sort of subsets of their TDM program that they brand separately for the different municipalities that participate. So they have a Get There Austin program, and adjust that branding based on what organization or municipality is participating. So these are just 5 very quick examples to give you a little bit of context before we head into some conversation in just a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. So with that context, I want to talk a little bit about why TDM for Charlotte, and especially why TDM at a regional level for the Charlotte region. So our area, our project area for this plan and program, as Scott mentioned, we cover 10 counties across the greater Charlotte region. So not just the city of Charlotte, but all the way out to Shelby and Cleveland County in the west, all the way out to Wadesboro and Anson County in the east, up to Iredell. We're actually within our TDM project area right now here in Salisbury. So we're really excited to have such a broad region, but it's also a big challenge, right? Scott gave some information about the context within these other TDM program jurisdictions. And within our region, we've got just over 2 million people. And I want to note that, in our region, over half of the residents within our TDM planning area live in one county and commute to another. Right? So when you think about transportation connections and providing a seamless transportation experience, that's really critical in our region, right? Because we know that transportation does not just stop at jurisdictional boundaries, right? If you're driving into or out of Charlotte, you're not thinking about, okay, I'm leaving the city of Charlotte now, or I'm leaving the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization's jurisdiction and entering another one. You're just driving. You're just trying to get to work or get your kids to school. So we really wanted to think about ways that we could acknowledge that reality and plan for that reality for the residents, the employees, the business owners, and the visitors within our region. It also helps that we have some backing and some support from NCDOT. So in their strategic plan update in 2018 for their statewide TDM plan, they actually looked at and called out the Charlotte region in particular and noted, with our population size and the most significant traffic congestion in the region, right? When we think about reducing our environmental impact, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and making our region a more livable and sustainable place, the Charlotte region needs TDM. So this effort also stems out of a recent regional collaborative effort to develop the first ever regional mobility and transit vision for Charlotte, which was the Connect Beyond Regional Mobility Plan. And that was a collaborative effort where we brought together transportation planning organizations, local planners, businesses, transit commuters, transit riders, advocates across all modes, and other stakeholders, universities, public service providers from across the region, as well as our 17 different transit providers that we have within our 10-county region. So when you talk about coordination, that's quite the animal that we're working with in Charlotte. But we brought all of these stakeholders together and asked, what do we want transportation to look like in our region as we look out at, 2040, 2050 and beyond. And really the vision was a seamless and interconnected transportation system where we have mobility-friendly places, we have expanded mobility choices so that folks can use the modes and the travel options that work for them. We have, rural to urban connections and vice versa. We're connecting all of our communities across the region. And transportation demand management is one of the most critical first implementation steps. So developing this plan and program for the region is one of our first early wins and one of the most important, I think, recommendations across the entire plan because TDM supports all of these plan priorities in so many different ways. So in our work so far with some of our stakeholders, we've identified a vision for what we want TDM to look like in the Charlotte region, and that comes down to 3 key things, right? We want the program to be sustainable, and that doesn't only refer to environmental sustainability, which is incredibly important, but we also want to think about long-term program viability, right? We don't want this to be a one-time planning effort. We want it to be sustainable and for it to build over time. We also want it to be relevant, right? So we want to provide practical strategies and support for communities that are context sensitive and practical for them to implement in ways that make sense for them and their community members. And finally, we want it to be effective, right? So what good is a TDM program if it doesn't influence travel behavior, right? We want to see actual impacts to folks, making decisions to choose non-single occupancy vehicle modes of transportation and making deliberate and intentional choices about how and why and when they travel. And one other thing I want to highlight too that's not on the slide but that is a major focus for us is making sure that transportation options are affordable and accessible and known for everyone across our region. Those are really important points that we've heard so far from our stakeholders as we've done this work. So what has this process looked like? We are pursuing pretty much a 3-phase process, and I want to take a moment here to thank the folks who have been involved so far who are in this room, especially NCDOT and the folks in the Integrated Mobility Division who are some of our funders. Alex is down there. Thank you, Alex. We also work very closely with Terry from Bike Walk, as well as folks from Sustain Charlotte, CATS, the Charlotte Area Transit System, the Charlotte Department of Transportation, the City of Gastonia, and others across the region. We have a 16-member steering committee with representation from colleges and universities, the healthcare system, business owners, local government. So we're really appreciative of all the partnership and collaboration that's gone into this so far and the guidance that those folks continue to provide. Right now, we are kind of in between. We're moving slowly from program foundations, right, where we're taking in information and assessing, you know, where we are now and where we'd like to go in the future, what our vision is for this program to make sure it's sustainable. But we're also starting to shift into program development, so understanding really what are our focus areas going to be, what are those areas of practical implementation and support that we will be providing and pursuing funding to provide in the future. And finally, next spring, we'll look to shift to program adoption and implementation, so shift from plan writing to actually propping up and running this program with the goal of wrapping up in June or July of 2024. So as I mentioned, we're here, and partner outreach, that's you. As Terry mentioned in his opening remarks today, there's so much knowledge and expertise and wisdom in this room, and we really want to tap that as we're, you know, starting to develop our areas of programmatic focus. So I'll hand things back to Scott before we engage with you all and provide a bit of an interactive activity to gain some of that wisdom.
Thanks. So I have a little bit of a confession to make. You all have sort of been lied to. You've been tricked. This isn't really a conference session. This is a captive focus group. So this is all to set you up to help us write the TDM plan. And we want to tee that conversation up. We want to talk a little bit about behavior change. So when we were planning for today, Reaghan and I realized that you know, this is an incredible opportunity. The Bike Walk Summit is where all the best thinkers in active transportation across the state gather every year. We'd be crazy not to get their best ideas on this. Behavior change is something that I'm not a behavior change psychologist, but I'm really fascinated by it. And so we're going to play a video here in just a second, but first wanted to sort of quantify the challenge that we feel like we're looking at in the Charlotte region. So the stats that you're looking at here on the screen are from the Charlotte Strategic Mobility Plan, which was just adopted by Charlotte City Council in 2002. These aren't stats that capture the whole region, but they're pretty close to what the travel behavior is for that 10-county region. And you can see that close to 80% of us in the Charlotte region choose SOV as our primary trip. The Strategic Mobility Plan set out a different vision and described an aspiration of what if we could achieve a 50-50 split? What if half of us in the Charlotte region chose SOV, but the other half did something else? What would that mean? And so they started through that plan to describe a different future and what that might look like, and also what new capacity that would mean for growth. There's a ton of growth coming to the region. It would be ideal if not everybody who moves to Charlotte brings their car with them. And so if we can make that more of a reality, then this is new capacity for growth without having to widen roads or do some of the things that we'd prefer not to have to do with that growth coming. So how do we change travel behaviors to achieve this? This is sort of a question that we've really been grappling with. And to tee that up, I'm going to play a video here in just a second. Is anyone familiar with the elephant and the rider theory of behavior change? Anyone heard of an author called Dan Heath? So he's written a bunch of books based on some psychology work, a researcher named Jonathan Haidt. You'll hear more about this in the video. But I think it's a really fascinating rubric for behavior change that I'm not a psychologist, but I can understand it. So we want to play that for y'all and get you thinking about kind of this model of behavior change theory, and then we're going to launch into your captive focus group.
Psychologists know that there are two systems in our brains, the rational system and the emotional system. Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist at NYU, came up with a great analogy for these two systems. He said, think of your brain as a human rider atop an elephant. The rider represents the rational system. That's the part of us that plans and problem solves. The rider might do some analyzing and decide, hey, I want to go that way. But it's the elephant, representing the emotional system, that provides the power for the journey. The rider can try to lead the elephant or drag the elephant, but if these two ever disagree, who would you bet on? The elephant has a 6-ton weight advantage, and it's exactly that power imbalance that makes adopting new behaviors very hard. If you want this duo to head a new direction, you also need to think about the path, which represents the external environment. This duo is more likely to complete a journey if you can shorten the distance and remove any obstacles in their way. So bottom line, if you want to lead change, you've got to do 3 things. Give direction to the rider, knowledge of how to get to the destination. You've got to motivate the elephant, which means tapping into emotion. And finally, you need to shape the path to allow for easy progress. That's how change happens.
So I really like that as just a tool to kind of guide some of our work around TDM, because I think it's pretty easy and simple for most of us to understand. I also buy into this idea that we all have 2 sides. There's sort of rational side and the emotional side, and depending on the work we're doing or who we're interacting with, we may fall into more of one or the other. And so I think the challenge in front of us is that we need to try to figure out how to appeal to both of those sides, because we don't know who we're going to be talking to at any given time. And then also help shape the external path. So how do we make those choices, non-SOV choices, easier for folks to make in terms of infrastructure and access and equity? With that sort of rubric to guide your thinking, we're going to transition now into getting some of your best thoughts for us on how we should move forward with developing this TDM program for Charlotte. So Reaghan's going to help walk us through how to get you all set up to participate.
Yes, so how many of you have used Pole EV before? Is anyone familiar? Handful. Okay, great. Well, hopefully it should be nice and simple. Hopefully you all have mobile devices or some sort of computer or tablet available. Go ahead and pull out your device, and you're going to bring up your browser. Go to poleev.com and then enter Centralina. It's just Central and then Ina. And go ahead and give me a thumbs up once you've kind of gotten that figured out. If anyone needs help, let us know and we can assist. I'm seeing some thumbs ups. Good stuff. So when you bring up poleev.com, it should prompt you for the room that you're trying to enter. Sweet. We doing good? Do we have anyone else needing some assistance? Feeling good? Okay. Cool. All right. We're going to start some interactive polling. So as I click to this, oh, sure. Sure. Absolutely. Yes, so we're going to Poll EV, so POLLEV.com. What's that? Like it's not loading. Oh, uh-oh. We've got some folks who are getting it up. If it's not working, you can try putting like a www dot in front of poll EV and see if that works.
We will
Or
also be
Wi-Fi,
walking
yeah.
around with mics just to get some of your thinking too. So if you're not able to log in, don't worry. There'll be a chance for
Yeah.
everybody to pitch in.
Absolutely. All right, we'll give another couple seconds and then we'll move forward and open up the first polling question. All right. And some of you have already jumped in, but this question is, what do you see as the biggest barriers to inspiring behavior change and incentivizing non-SOV trips, so alternative trips? Hopefully you're seeing that on your screen. If you're not, like Scott mentioned, I think we have another handheld mic we can come around and have folks contribute.
I'm particularly interested in if someone put other, what the other might be. We can't pretend to guess at all the barriers that might be out there. So maybe if you put other and feel like you have an insight, we'd love to hear it.
So my other would be the ready availability of uncongested freeways.
Thank you.
Good morning. My other is a simple one. The lack of ADA access. You know, it's a discrimination and oppression that continues since 1990s ADA law. Most counties don't even have plans yet or transition plans, and you know, lack of following with the federal civil rights law is just pure discrimination for 3+ decades, and it continues.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yep. It takes more time to commute other ways. Yeah. Sure. Why don't we just go like popcorn style and I can repeat answers? Yeah. Stigma for taking transit. Sure. Yep. Personal vehicles make you feel more confident, maybe more secure. Yeah. Yeah. It requires sacrifice sometimes to make a different choice. Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna take a few more and we've got some other questions. Go ahead. Yeah. Driving's easier. Sure. Yep. I had one right here. Yes. Parking strategy is a big TDM bucket of things to consider. Yeah, let me take one more. I had one over here. Change is hard. Yeah. Yes. All right, let's go to another. There's going to be lots of opportunities to interact. So.
Sure thing. And just want to call out too, we see lack of convenient access to alternative modes is what's coming out as I think the top consensus from the options we provided. So transit connections and sidewalk, ped bike connections as well.
Awesome.
So for this one, what would it take to get you to change your own travel behavior? Let's put ourselves in the shoes of those we're trying to work with, right? For this option, you're going to have the ability to upvote or downvote. So if you agree or you see something come in that you also want to echo, you can definitely do that. Give that thumbs up. Getting lots of options coming through. So we see access to daily needs close to home. Oh, here we go. Let me go back. Sorry. Ooh. Here we go. I'm going to have to be on the slide here, I think.
Seeing lots of transit-focused answers: fare-free transit, better transit accessibility.
Convenient, efficient mass transit. I'm going to scroll down a little bit just so we can see some others. Safe infrastructure, safe and high quality facilities, access to transit near home and work. Mm-hmm. End of trip facilities, want to call that one out as well. Reliability of alternative mode options, frequency, distance to destinations. And I heard someone mention this earlier, but our current land use patterns, right, are a huge obstacle to non-SOV modes, especially outside of our urban areas. So when we think about how we're serving our rural and suburban communities in particular, I think that's a big barrier to overcome for sure.
So I'm going to refer us back to the elephant rider path rubric. My observation so far is that almost all the answers that are popping up on this screen have to do with the path, the access and the types of options that are available. I'm curious if anyone has any answers that have more to do with how we motivate people's rational versus emotional sides to make those choices. Sure. Yeah, so numbness to the commute situation and the expense of it. Yeah, sure, over here. Yeah. That's the first time someone has mentioned the carrot versus stick thing. My impression of our region historically is that we've been very eager to dangle carrots, but not as eager to apply sticks to our transportation thinking and make the trade-offs that might be required with that. Yeah, good point. Over here. Yeah. Yeah, the whole conversation about self-driving and autonomous vehicles and does that increase VMT or decrease? I think is still an open question. Yeah. I saw a hand over here. I'm sorry. Yeah, here. Yes. Yeah. That's so that I think that's one of the strongest responses we've heard so far about appealing to the elephant, the emotion. How do we get people to enjoy their commutes more? Yeah, great point. You're here in the back. Yes. Great point. Housing affordability. The places that have the best access to greenways and high-frequency transit are, of course, going to be the more expensive places in our communities right now, given what folks are looking for and how they're expressing their preferences. So we need to build more of those places so that it's not such a clear supply and demand issue. Let me take maybe one more. Yeah. Yeah. Great answer. Yeah, knowledge and confidence to make a different decision. Maybe you have a bike in the garage, but you haven't ridden it since you were 12 years old and you're nervous about riding in traffic. Yeah, great point. This is fantastic. All right.
So next up, and I know some of you got to already start answering this one when I was having difficulty with the slides, but what types of TDM strategies, tools, resources like education, like training, but also, you know, think outside the box, what would help support the work that you all do in your communities to incentivize and bring awareness to non-SOV modes?
And this is I think, particularly important question because what a TDM program typically seeks to do is equip people like us in this room with the resources to do their jobs even better, even more effectively than we're doing them now.
Subsidy programs is coming out on top. Also communication tools, trip planning resources and incentives and encouragement. For the sake of time, I think we maybe want to keep going forward. Does that sound okay? So our next prompt is actually 3 in 1. So you'll see a button that says Start Survey, but we're going to ask you to think about, you know, for urban, suburban, and rural communities, how do those strategies differ, right? So we thought earlier about context-dependent and context-sensitive TDM programming, right? What strategies seem to rise to the top, right? And what things are going to be most important based on that land use question, right? And based on our development and density patterns in those different communities. 91 surveys underway. Love this.
How many of you all work primarily in rural areas? Okay, awesome.
Okay.
You all, we really want to hear from. I think a lot of the TDM work that's been done across the country tends to focus more on the urban-suburban context. The rural access to different transportation choices, I think, is a harder nut to crack. So particularly want to hear your best thinking. No pressure. It's a fill in the blank, right?
It's a pick from the options, but if you want an other or you feel like something's missing, definitely raise your hand and let us know. So if there's any that you feel like are missing, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And that spans community context, urban, suburban, rural. Yep. Yep. Great point. Great. David? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that the comparing yourself to other cities that maybe you don't aspire to their transportation challenges. Yep. How are we doing on time?
Let's see. I'm going to go ahead in the slides. Let's see.
This has been very
Here we
helpful,
go.
by the way. Thank you all.
So for urban communities, we're seeing infrastructure improvements is jumping out, as well as parking pricing and subsidy programs, incentive programs, communication as well. Yeah. For parking pricing and parking strategies? I think when we're thinking about it, yeah, that was our intention was, you know, bike ped infrastructure, supporting transit infrastructure improvements, yeah. Let's see, for suburban communities, we're seeing also infrastructure improvements, but also commute support, right? So assisting folks maybe in ensuring they have that support to make alternative commutes and trip planning resources. And in rural communities, we're seeing, again, infrastructure improvements rise to the top, commute support, communication tools, trip planning, also incentives and subsidies.
One thing we've heard a lot about in, I mean, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, but especially since then, is broadband access in rural areas and supporting teleworking or flex work schedules from folks that may choose to live out in more rural situations.
All right, for the sake of time and the sake of lunch, we'll keep going. What TDM strategies do you see as the best fit for encouraging partnerships with traditionally underserved or underrepresented groups? How do we incorporate equity and accessibility into TDM?
I think the ADA point is resonant with this question as well.
Absolutely.
Anyone want to shout out some responses while others are participating? Partnerships. I mean, think of the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis who maybe aren't within your specific organization. Participation, funding, kind of leveraging resources in other ways. I mean, that partnerships is a very loose idea, I think, in the context of this question.
Seeing a lot of great answers come through from providing language accessibility, including underrepresented groups in planning, you know, and decision-making processes, incentives, offering funding, you know, putting your money where your mouth is, right?
Well,
Bike rack giveaways.
One example that I'm familiar with, and I'll also mention to give a shout out to a couple of the folks in the room. So Sustain Charlotte has done a lot of work along the West Boulevard area in Charlotte, a traditionally underserved, underrepresented population. And a lot of that work has been focused on transportation access and equity. And I think they've been really successful in kind of lifting the voices of that community, giving them greater access to things like corridor studies that result in investments for pedestrian and bike improvements. That's just one example, and a quick shout out to Eric and Meg.
All right.
Yeah, well, I think the short answer is yes to the extent we can, and I think the macro level challenge to origin and destinations is the one Reaghan described earlier, that more than half the folks in our 10-county region commute across county lines. Theirs are not short distance commutes that are occurring, which makes non-SOV a lot tougher. That's right.
Yeah. Exactly. There's also a bit of a data gap there, right? So we've got a lot of information about vehicle commute trips and vehicle origin destination trips, right? We don't have that same infrastructure statewide for bike counts, ped counts. So when we think about how to measure and benchmark our success, right, that's a big barrier that I think we as a state need to work to overcome.
Yeah, reduction in BMT, agreed. I love seeing the e-bike grants on here. Someone's obviously familiar with what they've been doing out in Denver and other places.
Yeah.
Yep. rethinking how the big federal and state dollars are funneled into transportation projects. And we are fortunate that the folks who are our primary funders are the folks at IMD who are thinking about transportation in that way.
Oliver, I'm looking to you for a sense of time. We only have one more, which is more of an open Q&A.
Yeah, so we can jump in.
Sure.
We've got a bit of a buffer built in, but we can,
Okay, cool.
if you want to do this one more question, and then we'll take a short Q&A.
Yeah.
And then
Great.
there again, we're going to have some time at lunch, so if you've got follow-up questions for any of the speakers this morning, feel free to catch them at lunch. We've got plenty of time built in there for you to kind of mix and mingle. So,
Yep. Over here. Heather? Yeah. Great point. Yeah, follow the money. The state legislature has specific requirements for how that money gets funneled to projects, and right now that formula is stacked pretty heavily away from highway widenings, or sorry, toward highway widenings, away from ped, bike, transit, ferry, aviation, all the other modes. Yeah, over here. Yeah, great point.
yeah, I might actually jump in because I did see somebody mention on there that is the transportation choices of future generations. And I'm just curious what you're seeing. Obviously we're planning for long-term, years, decades down the road. Engaging younger generations, just from my personal experience, I've worked at a college, I have nieces and nephews, they are driving later. More and more of them are choosing not to get driver's licenses,
Right.
not taking cars to college. What are we doing to engage that population and that demographic in the decision making for the future, for their future, because those are going to be the ones using those roads. And if they're the ones making the choices to drive less, what are we doing to let those voices be heard in that planning process?
Yeah, great point. And part of my observation on that is I think it's true that car ownership has gotten more expensive over time, not cheaper. And so it may have been the case in past generations that a kid right out of high school could pretty easily afford to own and maintain a car. I don't think that that's the case anymore, and I think that's driving some of that decision making. Yeah, sure. I think the point coming from over here about, you know, periods of social movements related to transportation is a really interesting one, and it's bringing to mind the fact that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you know, not that long ago in a macro scale of things, there was a social movement around streetcar transit and the way that we built our cities around that. And for millennia of human history before that, the way we built cities and transportation was all around walkable proximity. So in the last 100 years or so, we've completely remade the way that we build cities and invest in transportation. And it's kind of humbling sometimes to remember that's just a blink of human history that we've done that.
All right, so in the interest of moving things along and heading towards lunch, if you guys have some wrap-up comments, and then if you have questions or any comments, you know, please take these conversations to lunch, track down Reaghan and Scott during the rest of the sessions, and keep these conversations going. But I'll let you guys wrap up, and then we'll head over same place as breakfast.
Thanks, Oliver, and we'll be super quick. Just want to thank you all so much for participating and engaging and interacting with us. We really appreciate it, and it'll be directly, used to inform some of our plan and program development efforts. So thank you for that.
Thank you all.